There are mistakes you make and recover from in 30 seconds. You send an email with a typo. You mispronounce a word in a meeting. You walk into the wrong conference room and back out with an apologetic wave. These are the small turbulences of professional life. They happen, they pass, they become the kind of story you tell at happy hour with a drink in your hand and the comfort of distance. And then there are the other kind. The kind where you watch the send confirmation appear on your screen and you understand, in the specific horror of a moment that cannot be undone, that you have just altered the trajectory of your professional life in a direction you did not choose and cannot reverse. I had the second kind, on a Wednesday, at 11:43 in the morning, in the open plan office of a digital design agency called Meridian Creative, where I had been working for 7 months, and which was run by a CEO whose name was in my phone under a contact I had never once intended to message directly. The photo was not scandalous. I want to be clear about that because the word private carries implications and I need to correct them immediately. It was a photo I had taken that morning, a mirror selfie in my apartment, good light, good angle, the kind of photo you take on a day when everything about your appearance has cooperated and you want to document the evidence. I was wearing a fitted navy blue shirt. My hair was right. I was smiling in the specific way you smile when you're alone, and the photo is just for you. It was a good photo. It was also never meant to leave my camera roll. I had been trying to send it to my friend Danny, who had texted me that morning asking for a recent photo for a group chat she was making. My phone had auto-completed. The contact names were adjacent in my recents. Danny Chen, Daniel Park. Daniel Park, CEO of Meridian Creative, my boss's boss's boss. The person whose name appeared at the top of company-wide emails and at the bottom of the org chart in the way that names at the bottom of org charts do, present, defining, theoretically accessible, and practically unreachable. I had sent the photo to Daniel Park. My name is Ren Kato, 27 years old, Japanese-American, third generation, the product of a San Francisco household where competence was the primary love language and embarrassment was the thing you recovered from quickly and privately and never mentioned again. I was a senior UX designer at Meridian, which meant I was good at my job and knew it, and had spent 7 months being good at it in the specific quiet way of someone who wanted the work to speak rather than the personality. I was also gay, which I was professionally out about in the easy way that Meridian's culture made possible. It was a good company in that regard, genuinely, not performatively. Nobody had ever made it something I needed to manage at work. It was just a fact, like being a designer, like being third-generation Japanese-American, like preferring tea to the office coffee. Daniel Park was 34, Korean-American. He had built Meridian from a 3-person studio to a 40-person agency in 6 years, which was the kind of trajectory that produced profiles in design publications and speaking invitations at conferences, and the specific quality of professional gravity that made rooms orient toward a person when they entered. I had been in the same physical space as him 4 times in 7 months, a company all-hands, a design team review where he had briefly attended, a building lobby crossing that had produced a nod of mutual acknowledgement, an elevator ride that had lasted 40 seconds and during which we had both looked at our phones with the unspoken agreement of 2 people sharing an enclosed space who had decided not to perform small talk. I had formed no particular opinion of him beyond. Competent, contained, occupies space with the ease of someone who stopped wondering whether they belonged in rooms years ago. I had not thought about him in any personal sense. Until 11:43 on a Wednesday when I sent him a photo of myself in a fitted navy shirt in good light and a smile that was only ever meant to be for me. I stared at the delivered confirmation for approximately 4 seconds. Then I opened the message thread, Daniel Park, a thread that had previously contained 0 messages because why would it contain messages? I was a senior designer and he was the CEO and we communicated through 17 layers of organizational structure. And I confirmed that yes, the photo was there, delivered, presumably seen, because it was 11:43 a.m. on a Wednesday and Daniel Park was in the office. I had seen him pass the glass-walled meeting room 20 minutes ago. I put my phone face down on my desk. I picked it up again. The message was still there. I considered my options, which were do nothing and hope he assumed it was a misdirect and forgot about it immediately, send a follow-up explaining the autocomplete situation, resign, relocate to another city, or enter witness protection. I ranked these in order of feasibility and concluded that the follow-up explanation was the only viable path, because doing nothing was its own kind of statement, and the other options were disproportionate. I typed, "I'm so sorry, this was meant for a friend. Autocomplete, please disregard." I sent it. I put the phone down. I attempted to return to the wireframes I had been working on. 3 minutes passed. My phone buzzed. I looked at it with the specific dread of someone who has been waiting for a notification they do not want. No need to apologize. Good photo. 3 words. Good photo. 3 words from my CEO on a Wednesday morning, delivered with the brevity of someone who had considered what to say and had decided that simple was the correct register. I read it 4 times. I put the phone down. I picked it up. Good photo. I was aware, sitting at my design desk in the open plan office of Meridian Creative, that something had just happened that did not fit into any professional category I had a framework for. It was not harassment. Good photo was not harassment. It was a mild compliment delivered without pressure or implication. It was not nothing. Good photo from your CEO in response to an accidental personal message was categorically not nothing. It was something in between, something that didn't have an obvious label, and the absence of an obvious label was the part that was going to occupy my mind for the rest of the day, whether I chose to let it or not. I chose, with the competence that was my family's love language, to return to my wireframes. The wireframes were very bad that afternoon. I told Danny at lunch. Not Danny Chen, Danny Okafor, my closest friend at Meridian, a content strategist who had the specific quality of processing every piece of information she received as both a friend and a professional and delivering responses that addressed both registers simultaneously. She listened, she looked at the message thread. She was quiet for a moment in the way she was quiet when she was being precise. Good photo, she said. Good photo, I confirmed. From Daniel Park. From Daniel Park, who you have spoken to approximately twice in 7 months. Approximately twice, I said, 40 seconds in an elevator. She looked at the message again. He could have ignored it, she said, or sent a professional response, something like no worries, these things happen. He sent good photo. Those are choices. He might just be casual, I said. Some CEOs are casual. Daniel Park, she said, with the specific intonation of someone who knew the subject well enough to dismiss the theory, is many things. Casual is not among them. I thought about the 4 times I had been in his vicinity, the quality of his stillness, the economy of his movement through a space. No, I admitted, it's not. So, she said, he chose those 2 words. He chose those 2 words, I said. We ate our lunch. She looked at the message one more time and handed my phone back with the expression of someone who had formed a hypothesis and was prepared to be patient about watching it develop. What are you going to do? She said. My job, I said, competently and without incident. That's very Ren of you, she said, very responsible. Thank you, I said. I wasn't entirely complimenting you, she said. I saw him the next day. Not planned, the building had one good coffee station in the small kitchen on the 3rd floor, and I had the habit of going at 10 a.m. before the post-meeting rush. And apparently Daniel Park had the same habit because he was there when I arrived, making coffee with the focused quiet of someone who took the making of it seriously. He looked up when I came in. There was a specific moment, brief, maybe 2 seconds, where we both registered the context of yesterday and made simultaneous decisions about how to inhabit the present one. Ren, he said. He knew my name, which was a professional. He was the CEO. He presumably knew his senior staff, but still. Good morning, I said. My voice was the correct professional register. I was proud of it. He poured his coffee. He looked at me with the dark eyes that I was noticing, specifically and for the first time, were the kind that held things, not cold, not impenetrable, but contained, the way a room with good insulation holds warmth. The wireframes for the Helios project, he said. I reviewed them this morning. The navigation logic is excellent. I looked at him. This was a non sequitur. This was my CEO in the third-floor kitchen mentioning my specific work the morning after good photo. Thank you, I said. The information hierarchy on screens 4 through 7 needs reconsideration, he said. The user flow assumes a level of prior knowledge that our research doesn't support. I agree, I said. I flagged it internally, but the timeline pushed the revision to phase 2. He nodded. Move it to phase 1, he said. The timeline is adjustable. He took his coffee. He walked out of the kitchen. He did not look back. I stood at the coffee station for a moment, processing the specific experience of being simultaneously professionally assessed and impossibly aware of another person, and thought about Danny saying he chose those 2 words with the precision of someone who read situations accurately. I made my coffee. I went back to my desk. I moved the information hierarchy revision to phase 1. And I thought, with the part of my mind that competence could not fully occupy, he knew my name. He knew my project. He chose those 2 words. Started with a wrong tap on a Wednesday, a photo meant for a friend, landing where it wasn't supposed to, and 2 words coming back that didn't fit into any professional category I had a framework for. I was going to be competent about this. I was going to do my job and not read into things and maintain the appropriate professional distance that 7 months of careful work had established. I was very good at competence. I was less good at ignoring things that didn't want to be ignored. The third-floor kitchen became a location with significance. Not because either of us made it one deliberately, at least not obviously, not in any way that could be named or cited. But the 10 a.m. coffee had stopped being a solitary habit and had become, over the 2 weeks following the Wednesday, something with more variable timing and occasional company. He was there 4 times in 2 weeks. So was I. The building had 3 coffee stations. The third floor had the best one, which explained the first time, and perhaps the second, and was an increasingly insufficient explanation by the fourth. We talked about work. This is important to establish. We talked about work every time, and it was genuine, not a performance of professional context to justify proximity. He had opinions about design that were informed and specific, the opinions of someone who had built a design agency and understood the field at a structural level even if his current role was no longer in the practice of it. He asked questions the way people ask questions when they actually want the answer, follow-ups, precision, the willingness to disagree. I disagreed with him about the Helios project's user research methodology on a Tuesday. Not belligerently, I made my case with the evidence I had and the professional confidence of someone who knew their work. He listened. He pushed back. I pushed back on his pushback. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "You're right about the sample size. I'll have the research team revise the parameters." I was prepared for a lot of responses to disagreeing with my CEO. Being told I was right was not prominently featured in my preparation. "Thank you for the pushback," he said. "It's useful." He left. I stood with my coffee and thought about the specific experience of being taken seriously by someone whose opinion of my work I had not previously known I cared about. I also noticed, during those 2 weeks, that he was not what I had assumed from the available data. The profile of a CEO who had built something from 3 people to 40 in 6 years had given me an impression, driven, probably, in the consuming way that builds things, probably not particularly present to the individual humans in the building, probably not the person who remembered a senior designer's specific project or learned their name unprompted. The available data had been insufficient. He was present in the way that mattered, not omnipresent, not performatively engaged with everyone, but when he was in conversation with you, you were what he was in conversation with. No phone, no partial attention. The full thing, which is rarer than it should be. He had a specific quality of humor that was so dry it sometimes took a beat to arrive. He made an observation once about a client brief I had mentioned that was accurate and slightly devastating and delivered with a completely straight face. And I laughed before I decided to, and he looked at the laugh with an expression that was, I noticed it specifically because it was brief and quickly managed, something that resembled satisfaction. He liked being the one to make me laugh. I filed this with the careful attention of someone who was still, ostensibly, being professional about everything. Danny noticed in the second week. "You're going to the third-floor coffee station again," she said. "The coffee is better," I said. "The coffee is identical on all 3 floors," she said. "Same machine, same beans, same water filtration system. I checked, because I knew you were going to say that." I looked at her. "He's there when you go," she said. "Sometimes," I said. "Ren," she said my name with the specific patience of someone who is being more accurate than you're comfortable with. "What's happening?" I thought about how to answer honestly without overstating. "We talk about work," I said. "It's professional." "The talking is professional," she said. "What about the rest of it?" "There is no rest of it," I said. She looked at me with the expression she wore when she was letting me maintain a position she knew was not going to survive contact with reality for much longer. "Be careful," she said, "not because either of you is bad, because you work here and you're good at your job, and both of those things matter." "I know," I said. "And because you've been closed for a while," she said more quietly, "since what happened with Felix, and she paused, I want the opening to be right." I thought about Felix, which I did not do often and did not do productively when I did. A relationship from 2 years ago, before Meridian, that had ended in the specific way that relationships end when one person grows in a direction the other person was not expecting, and both of them realized, too late, that what they had built was load-bearing on an assumption that no longer held. "This isn't," I started. "I know," she said. "I'm just saying." The project review happened in week 3. A standing quarterly design review where senior designers presented current project status to the leadership team. Normally, Daniel Park sent a representative, a VP of product who attended on his behalf and delivered feedback the following week in writing. Normally. This quarter, Daniel Park attended in person. I was presenting the Helios project. I knew this before I walked in. I had prepared with the thoroughness that was my default and the additional thoroughness of someone who had a specific and unnamed reason to want their preparation to be excellent. I presented for 12 minutes. The room was the way rooms are when someone is presenting well, attentive, with the specific quality of attention that means the material is landing. I knew the material. I knew the design decisions and the research behind them and the revisions I had made to the information hierarchy, which I referenced and which produced, from the seat at the end of the table, a fractional expression that I had learned enough to read as approval. After the presentation, during the Q&A portion, he asked me a question. Not a test question, a real one, the kind that comes from genuine engagement with the material rather than from the desire to appear engaged. He asked about the decision architecture behind a particular navigation choice, the reasoning behind a design decision that was counterintuitive at first reading, but which I had made deliberately and had data to support. I answered it, fully, clearly, with the confidence of someone who had thought about it more than he had asked for. When I finished, he nodded once, the fractional expression again, the managed satisfaction. The review moved on. I went back to my seat. My heart rate was doing something that I was attributing entirely to the professional pressure of a high-stakes presentation. Danny, beside me, did not say anything. She did not need to. Her expression said it for her. He messaged me that evening. Not the company messaging system, my phone, the thread that now had 3 messages in it, the photo, my apology, good photo. A fourth message arrived at 7:42 p.m. The Helios presentation was excellent. The information hierarchy revision was the right call. I read it, professional, entirely professional, a CEO following up on a presentation, except it was 7:42 p.m. and it was my personal phone, and the thread it arrived in had started with a photo I had taken on a morning when the light was right, and I had been happy alone in my apartment. I typed back, "Thank you. The user research revision helped, the clearer parameters made the design logic more defensible." A pause, longer than the previous response times. Then you defend your decisions well, even when the person you're defending them to has more institutional authority than you. I looked at that message for a long time. It was not flirtation, not exactly, not in any way that could be named definitively as flirtation. It was an observation, an accurate one. It was also the kind of observation that a CEO makes about a senior designer in a professional follow-up message to a presentation review, theoretically, possibly, if you squinted. I typed, "Good design should be defensible. If I can't defend a decision, I should reconsider the decision." "Agreed," he sent back. "Are you always this certain about your work?" "No," I sent, "only when I'm right." The pause again. "Good night, Ren." I put my phone down on my kitchen table and looked at the ceiling of my apartment, which had nothing useful on it, but which I looked at anyway, because sometimes the ceiling is the right direction to look when you are trying to organize your thoughts, and your thoughts are not cooperating. "Good night, Ren," my name again, with a comma before it, which was the specific punctuation of intention. I thought about Danny saying the opening to be right. I thought about Felix and the load-bearing assumption and the way things end when the architecture is wrong. I thought about a CEO who attended a review in person, who asked a real question, who messaged at 7:42 on a personal thread with punctuation that had comma placement decisions. I typed, "Good night." I did not add his name, but I thought about it. He showed up to the presentation. He messaged at night. He said my name with a comma before it. I had been closed for 2 years, since Felix, managing the specific aftermath of something that had felt right and turned out to be built wrong. I was good at managing. I was starting to be less good at pretending that what was happening in the third-floor kitchen and in the message thread, and in the specific quality of attention he gave me when we were in the same room, was something I could continue to file under professional and move on. He asked me to dinner in April. Not the slow accumulation of small moments finally tipping into something else, or not only that. He asked directly, with the same economy he brought to everything, in the third-floor kitchen on a Thursday morning when the coffee was brewing and the building was half empty because of a company off-site that neither of us had attended. "I want to take you to dinner," he said, "not as your CEO, separately from that." He looked at me with the dark, contained eyes. "I want to be clear about what I'm asking so there's no ambiguity." I looked at him. "I'm aware of the context," he said. "I'm aware it's complicated. I'm not asking you to resolve the complication right now. I'm asking if you'd like to have dinner." "You're very direct," I said. "I find ambiguity inefficient," he said. "I've noticed," I said. He waited. He was good at waiting, the stillness again, the quality of patience that was not passive but active, the patience of someone who had decided to give a thing the time it required. "I would like to have dinner," I said. He nodded, the fractional expression. "Saturday," he said. "There's a restaurant in Hayes Valley. I'll send you the details." He took his coffee and left. I stood at the coffee station, processing the experience of being asked to dinner by my CEO with the directness of someone who found ambiguity inefficient, and thought that whatever this was, it had its own internal logic that was going to proceed at its own pace regardless of my competence. I told Danny. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he said, "Not as your CEO." "Verbatim," I said. He named the complication explicitly. He said he was aware of the context. Ren, she said, he did the work for you. He named everything that needed to be named so you didn't have to navigate it yourself. I thought about that. Is that a good sign? It's a sign that he thought about it carefully before he said it, she said, which, for Daniel Park, means he thought about it for a while. She looked at me. How long do you think he's been thinking about it? I thought about the text thread, the third-floor kitchen, the review he attended in person, the message at 7:42 with comma placement. A while, I said. Go to dinner, she said. You've been closed for 2 years. The architecture might be right this time. I thought about how she had used my own mental metaphor without knowing it was my metaphor. How do you know the architecture? I said. I know you, she said. Go. The restaurant was the kind of place that understood what it was doing with light, warm, specific, the light of a room that wanted the people in it to be present to each other. He was there when I arrived, which I noted because it was the kind of detail that tells you things. He had come early, he was at the table, he had chosen to be waiting rather than arriving simultaneously. He stood when he saw me cross the room, which was, I noticed it, the specific care of it. We ordered, the food was good, the conversation was better. Without the professional frame, or with it loosened, the way it was when both people had acknowledged that the professional frame existed and had chosen to set it aside for an evening, he was different. Not unrecognizable, not performing a different self, but expanded. The humor was closer to the surface. He talked about the company in the way of someone who had built something and had complicated feelings about what building it had cost, which was honest in a way I had not expected. What did it cost? I said. He looked at his glass. Years where the company was the primary relationship, he said, which was a choice. I don't regret the company. I think I could have been more honest with myself about what I was trading. And now, I said. Now the company is stable enough that it doesn't require everything, he said. He looked at me. I've been thinking about what I want that's not the company. What do you want? I said. He looked at me with the dark, contained eyes, the old glass quality of them fully present. To find out if what I think is here is actually here, he said, carefully, without pressure, but honestly. I thought about Felix, the load-bearing assumption. I thought about what it felt like when the architecture was wrong and you found out too late. What do you think is here? I said. Something worth being careful about, he said. Someone I've been thinking about since a Wednesday in February when I received a message I was not expecting and responded with 2 words that I thought about for longer than 2 words should require. I looked at him. Good photo, I said. Good photo, he confirmed, which I sent because it was true and because I was apparently not, in that moment, being entirely professional. You're always professional, I said. I try to be, he said. You make it harder. The restaurant moved around us. I thought about the 7 months before the Wednesday and the 2 months after it and the specific difference between them, and I thought about Danny's architecture metaphor and whether this one had the right load-bearing structure. Daniel, I said, his name directly the first time I had said it to him. He looked up. I was closed for 2 years before the Wednesday, I said. Something ended that I built incorrectly, and I've been careful since then about openings. I held his gaze. I'm telling you this not as a warning, but as honesty. You said you find ambiguity inefficient. This is me being unambiguous. I appreciate it, he said. What would careful look like for you? Time, I said, and honesty, and the understanding that I take the professional context seriously, not as a reason not to explore this, but as something that needs to be navigated properly. He nodded. I'm already speaking with HR about a relationship disclosure protocol, he said. I did it before I asked you to dinner. If this goes forward, there will be a formal reporting line adjustment. It's manageable, and I wanted it managed before it needed to be. I stared at him. You did that before you asked me, I said. I thought about this carefully before I acted on it, he said. I told you I find ambiguity inefficient. I also find unmanaged complications inefficient. I thought about someone who did the structural work before the conversation, who named the complication explicitly, who stood when I crossed the room and chose to be waiting rather than arriving simultaneously. The architecture, I said, half to myself. What, he said. The structure of this, I said. You thought about the structure before you started building. He looked at me. Always, he said, you build from the foundation up, otherwise you're managing structural problems forever. I looked at him across the dinner table, in the good light of a restaurant that understood what light was for, and I thought about load-bearing walls and wrong assumptions, and 2 years of being careful, and a Wednesday in February, and 2 words chosen with more deliberation than 2 words usually receive. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. I'd like to find out if what you think is here is actually here, I said, carefully, honestly. The fractional expression, the managed satisfaction, and beneath it, the fuller version, the one he was allowing himself incrementally to show. 3 months. That is the time it took for the careful and honest to become something I could name without qualifying. 3 months of dinners, first at restaurants and then increasingly at one of our apartments. His, which was in the specific building near the water that I had imagined would be all clean lines and professional aesthetic, and which turned out to have a kitchen where he cooked seriously and a bookshelf that told you more about him than any conversation had yet managed, and a view that he had chosen deliberately when he could have chosen a different floor. 3 months of learning the texture of a person rather than the outline. He was exacting, yes. The reputation was accurate, the high standards were genuine, the preference for precision was not performed. But he was also the person who remembered things I mentioned in passing weeks later and referenced them in context, who pushed back on my design opinions with real engagement rather than positional authority. Who, when I finally told him the full story of Felix, not the abbreviated version I gave people, but the actual architecture of it, the wrong load-bearing assumption, and how long it took me to understand what had collapsed, listened with the full attention and said, "You built something with someone who wasn't honest with you about what they were building. That's not a failure of your judgment. That's a failure of their honesty." I had needed to hear that said clearly. I had not known I had needed it until he said it. The HR disclosure went through in April, a formal reporting line adjustment that meant I no longer had any direct supervisory relationship with Daniel Park, which I had never had in practice, but which was now documented accurately in the org structure. Danny reviewed the paperwork with the thoroughness of someone who cared about getting it right and said it was handled correctly. He did it before the dinner, she reminded me when I told her about it. I know, I said. Before you'd even said yes, she said. I know, I said. Ren, she said my name with the warm precision that was her way. I'm really happy for you. The photo came up again in June. We were at his apartment, the kitchen, him cooking, me at the counter, with a glass of wine occupying the specific role of interested observer of someone who took cooking seriously. The easy Saturday evening that had become the rhythm of the months. He said, without looking up from what he was doing, I still have it. Have what? I said. The photo, he said, the Wednesday one. I looked at him. I should have deleted it, he said. Professionally, I should have deleted it immediately. Why didn't you? I said. He looked up from the pan. The dark eyes, the contained warmth, the expression that had been letting more through over 3 months of deliberate openings. Because it was a good photo, he said, and because I looked at it and thought, whoever this person is, I would like to know them. He paused, which was a more consequential thought than I was prepared for at 11:43 on a Wednesday. I thought about the autocomplete, the horror of the wrong send, the 30 seconds of watching delivery confirmation appear and understanding the trajectory had changed. I was trying to send it to a friend, I said. I know, he said. If the autocomplete hadn't, you would have found a different reason, he said, simply without performance, or I would have. He went back to cooking. Things that are supposed to happen tend to find their route. I looked at him in the kitchen of the apartment near the water, cooking seriously in the good Saturday evening light, and I thought about roots and autocomplete and the specific mercy of mistakes that land somewhere better than the intended destination. "Daniel," I said. He looked up. "It was a good photo," I said. "I'm glad it went to the wrong person." The fuller version of the expression, the one he had been letting through incrementally for 3 months, and which was now, on a Saturday in June, simply the expression he wore when I said something that reached him. "So am I," he said. July brought the company's summer event, the annual gathering that Meridian held at an outdoor venue, the kind of event where professional and personal contexts blurred in the specific way of summer evenings, with good weather and people relaxed by the fact of being outside. Danny found me early in the evening and said, "You look different." "Different how?" I said. "Open," she said. "You look open." I thought about 2 years of being closed, the careful management of the aftermath of wrong architecture, the Wednesday in February and 2 words and 3 months of someone who did the structural work before the conversation and stood when I crossed the room and remembered things I mentioned in passing. "I am," I said. She hugged me, the specific hug of a friend who has been watching something come true and is glad about it. Later in the evening, he found me near the edge of the venue where the city was visible below, and he stood beside me with the easy proximity of people who had learned each other's space, and we looked at the city doing its July evening thing, enormous and indifferent and beautiful. "How's the photo situation?" he said very quietly. I looked at him. "What photo situation?" "The autocomplete risk," he said. "Have you taken any good photos recently that you might accidentally send to senior leadership?" I laughed, the real one. He looked at the laugh with the expression of someone who had made a project of producing it and found the project worth continuing. "My contact management has improved significantly," I said. "Shame," he said. I looked at him. "It was a good inciting incident," he said. "I'm not ungrateful for it." I thought about the wrong tap and the photo meant for a friend and the 2 words chosen with more deliberation than 2 words usually receive. I thought about the careful and the honest and the structural work done before the conversation and everything that had been built in the months since. "Neither am I said. The city spread out below us in the July evening, warm and lit, and entirely indifferent to the specific small history of a wrong send on a Wednesday that had found its way to the right place. He stood beside me, I stood beside him. The distance between us was exactly what it had been built to be, not managed, not maintained, not professional or careful or closed, just real. The way things are when the architecture is right and you know it before it has to collapse to prove it. I sent a photo to the wrong person on a Wednesday in February. He sent 2 words back. Those 2 words started something that was careful and honest and structurally sound from the beginning, because he did the foundation work before he started building, and I learned, finally, to recognize the difference between architecture that holds and architecture that collapses. It was a good photo. It was a better mistake. And what it started was the best thing that ever came from an autocomplete era in the history of mobile contacts.